In this exercise, I'm going to show you how to move, add, and delete anchor points inside of an existing path outline. I've gone ahead and saved my progress as headspikes.ai, found inside the 09 Pen Tool folder. And notice that my path outline here doesn't exactly match the tracing template below. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in so that we can see the path outline in more detail. Notice that I'm working inside the outline mode so that I can see my path outline without the fill and stroke attributes getting in the way. Also notice that a single anchor point inside of this path is selected. So when you see a filled point like this, a little filled colored square, that indicates a selected anchor point, and more than one anchor point can be selected inside of a path. These hollow squares represent the deselected anchor points. So the overall path outline is partially selected, and the way it really works is that the filled anchor point, it is selected as well as the two neighboring segments. So both of the segments that neighbor any given selected anchor point, they are selected as well in Illustrator's mind. So how do we go about modifying these points so that they better match the tracing template below? Well, you do that using the arrow tools. So if you grab the black arrow tool and you go ahead and drag someplace inside of your path outline, notice that you're going to move the entire path outline like so. So in our case, that's not what we want. That's great if you're moving a whole path outline from one location to another, but in order to reshape a path so that it better matches the template in our case, we need to be able to move the individual anchor points. So I'll go ahead and press Control-Z, Command-Z on the Mac. In order to move specific elements inside of a path, that is anchor points or segments or control handles or what have you, you need to switch over to the white arrow tool. Now, if I just switch to the white arrow tool and start dragging one of these points, then I'll move the entire path, because the second I clicked on the path with the black arrow tool, I selected all the anchor points and all the segments between those anchor points, so everything is currently selected. I'll go ahead and undo that movement by pressing Control-Z or Command-Z on the Mac. What I have to do is click off of the path in order to deselect it, and then click on an anchor point in order to select it independently like so. Now I'm going to go ahead and drag some of these points to new locations. For example, I'll drag this point upward a little bit, and I'll drag this one to a different location as well. And notice this is helping me to better match the angle of the spikes here inside of my tracing template. I don't have to get things exactly right. Obviously, you don't either. You can make whatever artistic decisions you want as you're moving through this illustration. If you're new to using the pen tool, I do suggest that you try to match the tracing template as closely as possible, just so that you can see if you can. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and drag this guy up a little bit. I'll drag this one to a new location as well. Drag this guy to about there. And that's a pretty good match. Now, I might want to drag this guy inward a little bit, because otherwise, if it's hanging out that far, this area of red right here, which is kind of the strange gum or something that is sort of like a gum in your mouth, but it's this kind of gum that's on the creature's head and is insulating the various spikes. So I'm not sure what's going on there, but we want to make sure that this red area covers up the intersections of every single one of the spikes. So I'm going to keep each one of these corners inside of that area just a little bit. So I'll cheat them inward. Now, let's say we're feeling like we don't have enough anchor points inside of the path, or maybe we have too many anchor points. What do? Well, you can add and delete anchor points inside of an active path. That is, the path has to be partially selected, like this one is right now, using the pen tool. So go ahead and switch back over to the pen tool, which you can do by pressing the P key, of course. And notice if you hover over a segment, then the pen tool cursor gets a little plus sign next to it. And then if you click, you'll add a point at that location, and then you can move that point to a new location if you like. Now, you may say, well, how in the world do I move it? I guess I have to switch back to the white arrow tool, because obviously the second you add an anchor point, it's automatically at the wrong location. There's no reason to have an anchor point unless it's changing the direction of the path outline. So this one needs to move to a new location, just by definition, right? And so that means that you spend a lot of time, theoretically, switching back and forth between the pen tool, which allows you to add a point, and then back to the white arrow tool, which allows you to drag it to a new location. Well, you don't really have to work that way, because when you're working with the pen tool, you can get the last used arrow tool on the fly by pressing and holding the Control key or the Command key on the Mac. And because the white arrow tool was the last one we used, pressing and holding Control or Command gets me my white arrow tool, which is exactly what I want. So I'll go ahead and drag that point to a new location, like so, and then once I've done that, then I can release the Control key or the Command key on the Mac and return to my pen tool cursor. Now then, what if you want to delete a point from the path? All you need to do is hover that pen tool cursor over an existing anchor point. So when you hover over an existing segment, you see a plus sign next to the cursor, which allows you to add a point. When you hover over an existing anchor point, you see a minus sign next to the cursor, which allows you to delete a point. Now, you're not going to create a hole in the path. You're just going to remove that anchor point and join the two neighboring anchor points with a new segment. So for example, if I make the strange decision of clicking on this anchor point right there, then I will not only delete that anchor point, but I'll connect the two neighboring anchor points with a new straight segment. So when you're removing points with the pen tool, Illustrator does not permit new gaps to form. All right, I'll press Control-Z, Command-Z on the Mac to undo that modification. Notice as soon as you press Control or Command-Z, that Illustrator goes ahead and selects all of the path, all the points and all the segments as well. So the undo command, while it remembers which path outline was selected, does not remember which anchor points were selected. So it's just something to bear in mind, and it's one of those things that gets a little tiresome over time. I wish that the undo command did keep better track of things. But anyway, the point that I probably want to get rid of is this guy right there. So I'm going to move my pen tool cursor over it, and I'm going to click in order to get rid of it. And then I'll press and hold the Control key or the Command key on the Mac, and I will drag this anchor point to a new location like so. Now, if you have any problems getting your pen tool to add and delete points, it's probably because somebody's gone in and changed a preference setting. So go ahead and press Control K or Command K on the Mac in order to bring up the Preferences dialog box. And then confirm that this checkbox right there, Disable Auto Add Delete, is turned off. However, if you discover over the course of using Illustrator that you don't want to be able to automatically add or delete anchor points using the pen tool for whatever reason, maybe you find that for some reason you do so accidentally on a regular basis, then you can turn this checkbox on to turn off that feature. And then if you decide to go that route, the way that you would add and delete anchor points is to switch to a dedicated tool. Notice that there is an Add Anchor Point tool right here, which you can get by pressing the plus key. You also have a Delete Anchor Point tool, which you can get by pressing the minus key. However, assuming that checkbox is turned off, you can automatically get to both of those tool variations when the pen tool is selected just by either clicking on a segment in order to add a point or clicking on an anchor point in order to delete it. And these techniques only work when the path outline is selected. You cannot modify deselected path outlines using the pen tool inside of Illustrator. In the next exercise, I'll show you how to reshape a path outline while you're in the process of drawing it.